James sat on the couch, flipping through the channels aimlessly, his mind not really focused on anything. It had been a long day, one of those days where everything seemed a little off. He'd come home early from work, hoping to spend some quality time with Laura. They hadn't had a real conversation in weeks, just the usual small talk over dinner, but nothing meaningful. The distance between them had become too apparent to ignore. He glanced at the clock. It was 7:30 p.m., and she still wasn't home. She had mentioned something earlier about needing to get a few things done, a work project she needed to wrap up before the weekend. But she'd been working late a lot lately, often coming home well past dinner. James didn't mind the occasional late night, after all, they both had demanding careers, but tonight something felt different. When the door creaked open, he didn't immediately look up. But then he heard her voice, soft and tentative, calling out from the hallway. "Hey, babe. Can we talk?" James turned toward the doorway. Laura stood there, her expression unreadable, her body language slightly guarded. The smile she gave him didn't quite reach her eyes. There was a coldness in the air, a distance that seemed to have grown wider between them in the past few months. "Sure," he replied, trying to shake off the unease that had settled in his chest. "What's up?" She walked over to him, her steps slow, as if weighing her words. "I've been thinking. I need some time for myself," she said, avoiding his gaze. "I was thinking about taking a short trip, just 2 days and 1 night, to clear my head." James blinked, taken aback. A trip alone. She had never mentioned this before. "A trip?" he asked, his voice betraying the surprise he felt. "Why?" "I mean, we usually do things together." Laura shifted uncomfortably. "I just feel like I need some space, James. I've been feeling overwhelmed lately, with everything, work, life, everything. I need to just get away for a bit." A part of him wanted to ask more, to dig deeper into her reasoning. But the words caught in his throat. Something about the request didn't sit right. The more he thought about it, the more uneasy he felt. "I don't know, Laura. This seems kind of sudden," James said, his brow furrowed. "Is there something you're not telling me?" Her eyes darted toward the ground, a flicker of guilt passing through them. "It's just a quick trip," she replied, her voice softer now. "I promise. I'll be back soon. You'll be fine." But James didn't feel fine. The knot in his stomach tightened. Why now? Why all of a sudden? And why did it feel like she was hiding something? As she went to grab her things, James couldn't shake the feeling that the truth behind this trip was more than just a need for space. Something was off, and he couldn't ignore it any longer. James and Laura had always been the couple that others admired. They met in their late 20s, both fresh out of college, full of ambition and dreams. Their connection was instant, a bond forged through mutual respect, laughter, and a shared love for adventure. They spent their early years exploring the world together, traveling to places both far and near, building memories that would last a lifetime. From spontaneous road trips to cozy nights in, they built a life that felt like something out of a movie, a life they were proud of. They had been married for 7 years now, and in those years, they had created a family, a home, and a shared future. There were the expected bumps along the way, stressful jobs, the balancing act of parenting, disagreements about finances, but nothing that ever felt insurmountable. They were partners in every sense of the word, supporting each other through it all. Their home, nestled in a quiet suburb, was warm, inviting, and, to James, felt like a sanctuary, a place where they could both escape the pressures of the outside world. But the last few months had been different. It had started subtly, almost imperceptibly. At first, it was the long hours Laura had been putting in at work. She had recently been promoted to a management position at her firm, and with that came a lot more responsibility. James understood that, he even encouraged her to take on the challenge. He was proud of her, and he admired her dedication to her career. But what started as a few extra hours here and there quickly grew into long nights, weekends spent at the office, and days where it seemed like she was more focused on her work than on their family. There had been fewer spontaneous dates, fewer nights spent watching TV on the couch together, fewer moments of quiet connection. They'd drifted, but James hadn't wanted to admit it. He told himself it was just a phase, something that would pass once Laura adjusted to her new role. After all, they had been through so much together. They had been through tough times before and come out stronger for it. But as the months passed, the distance between them only seemed to grow. The little things that once brought them closer, the tender touches, the lingering kisses, the conversations that went deep into the night, were slowly replaced with silence, routine, and the occasional exchange of, "How was your day?" James had noticed it. He had felt it. But he was too afraid to confront it, too afraid to face the possibility that the woman he loved so deeply might be slipping away. The truth was, James didn't know how to approach the growing distance. He didn't know how to tell Laura that he missed her, that he missed the connection they used to have. So, he buried his feelings, tried to focus on work, on their kids, on the things that made their life feel normal. But something inside of him told him it wasn't normal. Something told him that their relationship wasn't where it should be. Then came the trip. Laura's request to go on a 2-day trip alone came as a complete surprise. They had never done anything like this before. They had taken trips together, of course, but they always went as a couple or as a family. The idea of her wanting to go alone, to take a break from their life together, struck James as strange. At first, he dismissed it as just another self-care moment. He knew that Laura had been under a lot of stress, juggling her new role at work with raising their children and managing their home. She had always been someone who valued her independence, who needed time to recharge. James respected that, he even encouraged it. But there was something about the way she brought it up that set off alarm bells in his mind. She had been distant for months, and now, she was asking for a break from him and their family. It didn't make sense. "I just feel like I need some space, James," Laura had said when she first mentioned the trip. Her words had been soft, almost rehearsed, and her gaze never quite met his. "I've been feeling overwhelmed, and I think it would do me good to take a short trip alone, just 2 days and 1 night. I'll be back before you know it." James had tried to hide his concern, to smile and be supportive. "Sure, I get it. You've been working hard. A little getaway sounds nice." But inside, he was struggling. Why alone? Why now? He tried to brush it off, but as the days went by and Laura began preparing for the trip, his unease only grew. She spent more time on her phone, making arrangements, finalizing plans. She didn't share many details about where she was going or what she would be doing. When James asked, she gave him vague answers, nothing that felt solid or grounded in reality. As the departure day drew closer, Laura seemed eager, almost too eager. She packed her bags with a sense of excitement that James didn't quite understand. It wasn't like her to be so enthusiastic about leaving. There was a strange energy in the house, one that James couldn't quite put his finger on. Every time he asked a question, every time he tried to engage her in conversation, she seemed to brush him off, telling him she needed to get ready or that it wasn't a big deal. But the more she downplayed it, the more James's instincts screamed that something wasn't right. In the days leading up to the trip, there were more signs that things weren't as simple as Laura made them out to be. Small, subtle signs that James couldn't ignore anymore. One evening, James walked into the kitchen to find Laura hunched over her phone, typing furiously, her face flushed. When she saw him, she quickly locked the screen and stuffed the phone into her pocket. It was a strange, almost defensive reaction. He didn't say anything at the time, but the incident left him unsettled. Why was she hiding her phone? Why did she react that way? There were other moments like that, moments when Laura seemed overly protective of her phone, or when she suddenly changed the subject when James asked about her plans. Her work schedule had become more unpredictable, too. She would come home late, sometimes looking frazzled and distracted. And when she wasn't distracted by work, she was glued to her phone, texting someone in short bursts. At night, when he tried to get close to her, she would pull away, citing fatigue. The excuse was always the same: "I'm just tired, James. Let's just relax tonight." But the lack of affection, the distance between them, was becoming painfully obvious. The more James tried to ignore his suspicions, the more they grew. He had always trusted Laura, completely and without question. But now, every time she brushed him off, every time she avoided a simple question, the doubt crept in. Could it be that she was having an affair? Or was it just a phase, a moment of stress that she was trying to escape? James didn't know what to think, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The night before Laura was supposed to leave for her trip, James finally couldn't take it anymore. He needed answers. The uncertainty, the nagging feeling in his gut, was too much to bear. He needed to know the truth. "Laura," he said quietly as they sat down together in the living room, "what's really going on? Why do you need to go on this trip alone? What are you not telling me?" Laura looked at him, her face briefly contorting with something James couldn't place. Was it guilt? Was it fear? Her eyes darted around the room, and she hesitated before speaking. "It's just. I need some time for myself, James. There's nothing to worry about. I just need a break," she said, her voice unconvincing. She had said this before, but the words didn't sound like her. James felt the tension in the room, the distance between them growing larger with every word. He had known Laura for years, and he knew when she wasn't being truthful. "I don't buy it," he said, his voice rising slightly. "There's something you're not telling me. I can feel it." For the first time in a long while, Laura looked at him with a mixture of annoyance and something darker, maybe fear, maybe guilt. She stood up, crossing her arms over her chest. "I don't know what you want from me, James. I've told you everything. It's just a trip. I don't have to explain myself." Her words stung, and James's heart sank. There was no sincerity in her voice anymore. No openness. Just walls. That was when the final doubt settled in. The trip wasn't about space. It wasn't about getting away. It was about something else, something he couldn't yet see, but something that was tearing at the fabric of their marriage. James couldn't shake the feeling that Laura was hiding something bigger than just a quick getaway. And he wasn't sure if he was ready to find out what it was. The following morning, as the sun filtered softly through the curtains, Laura was preparing for her trip. James had spent a restless night, turning over the conversation in his mind, replaying every moment, every sign. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. As Laura moved through the house, gathering her things with an almost unnatural enthusiasm, James's heart tightened. The woman who had once shared everything with him was now an enigma, slipping through his fingers, leaving behind only fragments of the life they had built together. He sat in the living room, his mind racing. He couldn't let her leave. Not like this. Not without knowing the truth. His gut told him that this trip wasn't just a break for her, it was the final act in a story he wasn't ready to finish. He had to confront her again, this time without hesitation, without holding back. As Laura zipped up her suitcase, ready to head out the door, James stood up. "Laura," he said firmly, his voice steady but full of unresolved emotion. "I can't let you go without knowing what's really happening." She turned toward him, her face masked in confusion. "James, we've been over this. It's just a trip. A few days to clear my head." "That's what you keep saying," he replied, stepping closer to her. "But something's not adding up. I need to know what's going on. Why now? Why this sudden trip? Why the secrecy?" Laura took a deep breath, her face twitching with tension. For a moment, she didn't respond. She glanced away, then back at him. "You don't trust me," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Is that it? James's chest tightened. It's not about trust, Laura. It's about the fact that you're shutting me out. It's about the fact that you've been distant for months, and I don't know why. She hesitated, and for a brief moment, James thought she might finally tell him the truth. Her eyes softened, but there was no relief, no apology in her expression. Instead, she looked at him with something else, something more profound. James, she trailed off, and for a fleeting moment, James saw something in her eyes, something he hadn't noticed before. Guilt. Regret. But it was quickly replaced by something colder, something more final. I never meant for it to happen like this. His heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? What happened? Laura looked down, the words stuck in her throat. She swallowed, then lifted her head, meeting his gaze. I've been seeing someone else, James. Someone I care about. The words were barely audible, but they hit him like a freight train. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. James felt his breath catch in his throat. He had known it, had suspected it, but hearing it out loud was something else entirely. His hands shook, and he could barely bring himself to speak. How long? He asked, his voice barely a whisper, the weight of the question unbearable. About 6 months, she confessed, her voice cracking. It started slow. Just texts, conversations, but then, it became more. I didn't plan for it, James. I didn't want to hurt you. James's mind reeled. 6 months. 6 months of lies. The images of the last several months flashed through his mind, the late nights, the distance, the secrecy, and now it all made sense. She had been slipping away from him bit by bit, and he had ignored it, convinced himself it was just a phase. He had been living in denial, clinging to the belief that their love was stronger than anything. But now, the truth was undeniable. I don't understand, Laura, he said, his voice breaking. How could you do this to me? After everything we've been through? After everything we've built together? Tears welled in her eyes as she stepped forward, but James recoiled, unable to process the weight of her actions. I'm so sorry, James, she whispered, her voice thick with regret. I never wanted to hurt you. I don't even know how it happened. But it did. And now, I don't know how to fix it. A cold, empty feeling washed over him. The woman he had trusted, the woman he had built his life with, had betrayed him. The pain of it hit him in waves, but there was something else, something even deeper. It wasn't just about the affair. It was the realization that their entire life together had been built on a lie. The last few years had been a mask, a performance, a facade. The woman he loved had been slipping away, and he had missed it. Who is he? James asked, his voice trembling with both anger and disbelief. Laura took a deep breath, hesitating. Then she spoke the words that would shatter him even further. It's Eric, she said quietly. I met him through work. We became close, and one thing led to another. James's heart skipped a beat. Eric. The name sounded familiar, but it didn't fully register until the pieces fell into place. Eric wasn't just some random man. He was a colleague, a friend of theirs, someone James had trusted. They'd had dinner together, shared stories about work, about life. Eric had been in their home. He had shaken James's hand, exchanged pleasantries, and laughed at their jokes. And now, he was the man who had stolen his wife's heart. The revelation felt like a betrayal on a whole new level. It wasn't just that Laura had been unfaithful. It was that she had chosen someone James knew, someone he had considered a friend. The gut-wrenching realization that Eric, a man he had trusted, had been part of the destruction of his marriage was a blow he couldn't absorb. How could you? James's voice cracked, and he took a step back, trying to process the enormity of what was happening. How long has this been going on behind my back, Laura? How long have you been lying to me, pretending everything was fine. She opened her mouth to respond, but James couldn't listen to any more excuses. There was nothing she could say to justify her actions. Nothing that could fix the wreckage she had left behind. The woman he loved had shattered their marriage, and there was no way to glue it back together. But then, just as he was about to walk away, something unexpected happened. Laura spoke again, her voice low and full of shame. "James, there's something else. Something I need to tell you." He turned toward her, eyes wide with confusion. "What is it?" She hesitated, visibly struggling with her words. "The trip, it wasn't just to get away. It was for him. I was going to leave. I was planning to go away with Eric, to start a new life." She wiped away the tears that streamed down her face. "I don't know what came over me. But I've made my choice. I'm leaving." The finality of her words hit him harder than anything else she had said. She wasn't just confessing to an affair. She was telling him that she had already made plans to leave him, to walk away from their marriage and start anew with someone else. The woman he had given everything to, his heart, his trust, his love, was choosing a life with someone else. The devastation hit him in waves. Every breath, every beat of his heart felt like a betrayal. He wasn't just losing his wife, he was losing the future he had envisioned. All the plans, all the dreams they had shared for their future, were being torn away in a single moment. James's world was crashing down around him, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The twist was clear, the affair had never been a fleeting mistake. It was a planned escape, a future Laura had already chosen. And now, standing in front of her, James realized that he had been living in a dream that had long since ended. He didn't know what came next, but one thing was certain, their marriage was over. James stood there, his heart heavy, his mind spinning. He had spent the last 15 years of his life with Laura, building a family, a home, and a future together. Now, all of it had come crashing down in a single, painful conversation. His wife, his partner, was leaving him. And it wasn't just the affair that shattered him. It was the realization that, in the end, she had made her choice. She had already decided to walk away long before this conversation had ever happened. The silence between them was deafening. Laura stood there, tears streaming down her face, her hands wringing nervously in front of her. She wasn't begging for forgiveness, and she wasn't offering any real answers. She had already made up her mind. She had already moved on in her heart, even if her body was still standing there in front of him. "I never wanted to hurt you," Laura whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "But I've been unhappy for a long time. I didn't know how to fix it. And then I met Eric, and for the first time in so long, I felt like I mattered. I felt seen." James wanted to scream, to lash out, to tell her how much her betrayal had destroyed him, but the words were stuck in his throat. Everything he had ever known, everything he had trusted, was slipping through his fingers. He couldn't bring himself to say anything more. What was left to say? How do you respond to a confession like this, when everything you thought was true about your life, your marriage, is suddenly shattered? He stood there, staring at her, not knowing what to do next. His emotions were a swirling mess of anger, hurt, disbelief, and sorrow. But there was also something else, a strange numbness, a realization that maybe this was the end of something that had been dying for longer than he cared to admit. Maybe this wasn't just the affair. Maybe this was the result of years of neglect, years of emotional distance that neither of them had ever acknowledged. As the minutes passed, James's thoughts began to crystallize. He couldn't fix this. He couldn't make her love him again, couldn't undo the years of distance and lies. He couldn't erase the image of her with someone else, the knowledge that she had made plans to leave him. The pain was overwhelming, but he knew one thing for sure, he could not stay in this marriage. Not like this. "I don't know what to say, Laura," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you. I don't know if I even want to." Her face crumpled at his words, and she took a hesitant step forward, as though she wanted to reach out, to comfort him. But James took a step back, the distance between them widening with every breath. "I can't do this," he said, his voice steady but full of hurt. "I can't keep pretending everything is okay when it's not. I don't even know who you are anymore. I don't know who I am anymore." Laura stood there, the tears still falling, but there was nothing left to say. Nothing she could say to undo what had been done. She had already chosen her path, and James knew that no amount of apologies or explanations could change the reality of their situation. "I think you should go," James said, the words feeling heavy and final. "I think we both need some space. I need to figure out what's next for me. I need to figure out who I am without you." Laura nodded, the regret in her eyes palpable, but it didn't make a difference. The trust between them had been destroyed. Their marriage had been shattered. And neither of them could go back to the way things were. As she gathered her things and prepared to leave, James remained rooted to the spot, the weight of the moment sinking in. She was walking out the door. The life they had built together was slipping away, and James didn't know how to stop it. He didn't know how to fix the damage that had been done, and he didn't know if he ever would. The door clicked softly behind her, and James was left standing in the silence of their empty house. For the first time in years, the silence felt like a suffocating weight. Underscore 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 underscore. Days passed, and the world outside seemed to keep turning while James's life stood still. He found himself sitting in the living room, staring at the walls of the house they had shared. The silence was unbearable now. There was no one to share his thoughts with, no one to talk to. Laura was gone, and the future they had planned together had evaporated in the blink of an eye. James couldn't stop replaying the past in his mind, everything that had led to this moment. Were there signs he missed? Had he been blind to her growing distance, to her emotional withdrawal? He knew he couldn't blame himself entirely, but the questions gnawed at him. Had he done enough to keep their connection alive? Had he taken her for granted, too wrapped up in his own life, his own world, to notice that she was slipping away? And then there was the question that lingered in the back of his mind, the one he couldn't stop thinking about: what now? He didn't know. He didn't know how to move on from this. Could he ever trust again? Could he ever rebuild his life after everything had been torn apart? His future felt uncertain, like a blank page he wasn't sure how to fill. But for the first time in a long while, James realized that he had to face the truth: he was no longer the person he had been, and his life would never be the score underscore. As the weeks passed, James slowly began to rebuild. The pain of the betrayal never fully left, but with time, it became something he could bear. He focused on himself, on his career, on his friends, on finding a new sense of purpose. He began to realize that, while the past couldn't be changed, the future was still his to shape. But even as he moved forward, the question remained. Could love survive betrayal? Could trust be rebuilt after it had been shattered beyond recognition? James didn't know. But he was learning, slowly, that sometimes the most difficult thing to do is to let go, of the past, of the pain, and of the people who no longer fit into your future. What would you do if you were in his shoes? Could you ever move forward, or would you stay in the past, clinging to the person who betrayed you? And with that, James walked into the unknown. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it was his to define.